Are they anime in space? Are they noble, selfless citizens striving for a better tomorrow? Or are they Xenos filth? Whatever your perspective, the Tau Empire are going to be getting a bit stronger in the near future. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy and tactics focused 40k channel, where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. Today we'll be looking at some Xenos for a change, and going over all the previews that Games Workshop have given for The Greater Good, the new Psychic Awakening book, and the various new options that we've had teased for how Tau Empire are going to be improving in this book. In this video we'll be going over every rule that they've shown us, having a brief chat about its potential impacts, and what else it might indicate that might be present in this new book for Tau. So without further ado, let's get into it. So this is the sum total of the rules that Games Workshop have showed us on the faction preview for Tau that's come out just today. They have choose your own Sept tenets now, additional relics and stratagems, and a whole host of new rules for the Farsight Enclaves. Let's start with the mix and match Sept tenets first. This one was a reasonable bet that the Tau Empire were going to get. We've already seen it on the Craft Worlds and Drukhari, as well as in Space Marine successor chapters, and now the Tau have them too. As normal, you're allowed to pick two of these more minor benefits to put together to represent your chosen Sept, and this often means that you'll be able to run multiple different mini-Septs in one army to make the most efficiency out of different units, though of course Tau Empire do tend to have a lot of cross-synergy with rules like For the Greater Good, and various auras and things, so you might just want to keep it pure anyway. They've shown off two of the potential Sept tenets that we can pick, the first being stabilization systems. The rule for this is when resolving an attack made by a ranged weapon by a battlesuit model with this tenet, the model doesn't suffer any penalty for moving or firing with heavy weapons. This is a particularly nice one for the big battlesuits, particularly riptides and broadsides, who often have to choose between remaining stationary and firing at full effect, or moving and having their firepower output significantly reduced. In particular for riptides, this will allow them to pick other support systems, rather than just the one that allows them to move and shoot with no penalty, perhaps allowing them to take more velocity trackers and things than they would normally. So a decent boost, but obviously it only affects certain units from the army. Maybe good for an all battlesuit detachment or something. Next we have Soldiers in Arms, one that does affect most of the Tau army, and it increases the range of their For the Greater Good ability to 9 inches. For the Greater Good is basically their overlapping Overwatch rule, meaning that even if your unit is 9 inches away from the unit being charged, it will still be able to make their Overwatch attack. Now I do think that it's going to depend on what the other options for the custom Sept tenets turn out to be, to see whether this one actually sees play or not. The main thing that's scary about Tau Overwatch is that it's usually Tau Sept, and it's usually hitting on a 5+. While this will mean that you'll typically get a little bit of extra Overwatch from units that are far away from other units, I really don't know if that's going to be worth the 5+ Overwatch that the Tau Sept gets. And I feel that with proper positioning you can get a lot of the units within 6 inches anyway. So I'm a little bit more ambivalent on this one. Not sure it'll outcompete Tau, but certainly not a bad little pickup if it's an addition to another important Sept tenet. Of course it remains to be seen what the rest are, so we'll see if the combos do outcompete the standard Tau Empire one that we see most of the time. Surprisingly enough, they have certainly broken through with Craft Worlds when their Psychic Awakening book came out, which I wasn't expecting. I was thinking Alatok would still remain supreme, but that doesn't seem to have been the case, at least for the most part. Will be interesting to see it when we get the complete list. Next up we have something called a prototype weapon system, with an advanced EM scrambler. This one's a ghost kill battlesuit only, and essentially means that enemy models cannot set up within 12 inches of this model when they come on from reserves. Now this is a powerful ability and can allow you to zone out quite a large amount of the front line where ghost kills tend to operate. It is a little bit more restricted than compared with things like Space Marine infiltrators, which can have a much wider footprint and potentially cover a huge portion of the board. I'm a little bit uncertain as to how this piece of kit is actually going to get onto your ghost kill. If it's a relic, then typically you can only give relics to characters, and the ghost kill isn't a character normally, although potentially it could just be a additional piece of war gear that's going to be added to the ghost kills data slate. It's certainly a nice ability to have, but it does depend on what the opportunity cost is to get it. If it's a relic, there might be better things out there. If it costs points, it depends on how many points, so I guess we'll see. Up next we have a decently powerful looking stratagem called Coordinated Engagement. You select one unit of XV8 Crisis Battlesuits and one unit of XV8 Bodyguards from your army, and select one enemy unit. Until the end of that phase, When resolving an attack made by a model in either of those, you can treat the enemy units as having 5 marker light counters on them. This is pretty nice as it's pretty much a flat +1 to hit, and reroll ones for both units without having to worry about committing marker lights to the unit that they're targeting. And it's fairly easy to position as well, as you could have both of these units deep strike next to their intended prey. It certainly might see both of these units being taken up a little bit more than before, which is always good because the Crisis battlesuits are pretty much the iconic unit of the Tau Empire army. So decent options to get them to see a bit more play is a good thing in my book. A nice simple uncomplicated one this, a decent amount of extra damage for 2 CP, provided you've taken the units that you need. After this, the rest of the preview focuses on the Farsight Enclaves, implying that the Farsight Enclaves are going to get a bunch of new warlord traits, relics, and stratagems. Judging by previous Psychic Awakenings, I'd imagine 3 of each, but I might be wrong, I guess we'll find out. In my opinion, the stratagem looks like a really good one. It's just 1 command point and it's called Danger Close. You use this when a breacher team or strike team unit from your army is chosen to shoot with, and until the end of the phase when resolving an attack made by a ranged weapon by a model in that unit. When they're targeting an enemy unit within 12 inches, you can reroll the wounds roll. Naturally, rerolling wound rolls is absolutely fantastic whenever you can get it, particularly when you're using strength 5 weaponry. That essentially means that you're wounding Imperial Knights over half the time, let alone anything softer and squishier. Of course, it does require you to be up close, which isn't exactly ideal, but to be honest, in a lot of games, your opponent is going to be trying to push the advantage, or you're going to need to advance troops into the midfield to take central objectives, so I'd say that there's going to likely be opportunities to use this at some point in the game. Certainly a very solid one if you're thinking about going for a Fire Warrior heavy army. Next we have Aggressive Tactician. This is a warlord trait for the Farsight Enclaves, and it really increases the scope and range of Montcar. When the commander model declares Montcar, it affects all friendly Farsight Enclaves models within 12 inches rather than the normal 6. Montcar's great for giving a good aggressive punch early in the game, just as it should be, and this one will essentially allow you to get a lot better positioning with your units rather than literally having to bowl them all up right next to your commander. Certainly could be worth a pick in my book, but we'll have to see how it competes against the other options. Finally, we have a relic called the Mirror Codex. I've heard of this one before, and it's basically the counter strategy of the Tau Empire, mainly against the Codex Astartes, but here it states that Commander Farsight also applies his teaching to each alien race he encounters. Essentially, when resolving an attack made by a model with this relic against a unit that's within 18, you can re-roll the hit roll. Now this isn't bad, particularly if you're firing with a lot of powerful guns, say 4 fusion blasters for example, but bear in mind that commanders typically hit on 2s, so all it would take to re-roll your hit roll would be 1 marker light on the target, and for that you wouldn't even need to be within 18 inches if you were firing with longer range weapons, so it's not awful, and it's very flexible. One other use I could think of would be if you're advancing with, say, a Cold Star battlesuit or something, to try and get some insane movement out of it. Then it could allow you to have full rerolls to hit, including the negative one that you'd get from advancing, so it would significantly up his damage output, for example. Next up we have a preview that was shown on the Warhammer 40k Facebook site, which is another stratagem from the Greater Good called Modulated Weaponry. This one costs just 1 command point, and you can use it on any Sept model that isn't Titanic. Until the end of the phase, don't roll to determine the type of characteristics of heavy weapons that the model is equipped with. They instead just fire the maximum amount of damage, so for example a heavy D6 weapon does 6 shots for example. Could be handy to boost say an ion cannon on a hammerhead to 6 shots for example, and I've seen people discussing online using this on the Yavara with its enormous flamers and D3 haywire weapon as well, which seems about the biggest bang for your buck you're likely to get with this. Bear in mind that this is models not units, so you can't use it on an entire squad of crisis suits with flamers unfortunately, which would have been very nice indeed. It is another simple uncomplicated damage boost for a command point though, so it's certainly one to keep in mind if you've got any big heavy D6 shot weapons. To round it all off, we've also got a preview of Shadowsun's new rules. I must say I'm very impressed with the new model that she has, though she is perching on top of a shattered Imperial Aquila, so I don't think she's been getting on very well with humanity recently. Shadowsun's battlesuit has acquired more guns, and her fusion blasters have also seen a nice upgrade as well. In the preview, it says that she has the option to take either dispersed fusion blasters or high energy fusion blasters. It's interesting that they say that she has the option to take it rather than to choose firing modes, as I would have expected for this sort of thing, implying that she might have to be locked into the choice of one or the other before the game begins. They're not always 100% accurate with these previews though, so I guess we'll have to wait to see the actual rules. In any case, they're both quite decently powerful options. The Dispersed Fusion Blaster is 18-inch range, Assault 2, Strength 7, AP -4 and Damage D3, and it still has the normal melter rule, so whenever you're firing at a target within 9 inches, you roll 2d3 and pick the highest when you're rolling for damage. The High Energy Fusion Blaster is basically a normal fusion blaster but with 24-inch range, which is quite nice because if she's dropping in to melt some tanks, she'll be able to use the very nice melter rule even just coming straight out of Deep Strike. So it's certainly an upgrade whichever way you look at it, and it's quite nice to be able to tailor if you wanted a little bit more low strength shooting or a little bit more high strength anti-tank shooting now. In particular, they mentioned that the Dispersed Fusion Blaster might be quite good for dealing with Space Marines, and I agree with that analysis. Things like heavily armoured infantry such as aggressors and centurions really aren't going to be a fan of this. As well as this, she's also acquired even more guns. She has a light missile pod, which I wasn't entirely sure where it was on the model to start with, until I realised it's the one on her right hand, attached to a fusion blaster, with a missile pod that looks like it's only got 2 rockets on it. Maybe it'll be 1 shot per turn or something. And she also has a flechette blaster, which I'm not exactly sure where it is. Maybe it's in the equivalent place on the left fusion blaster, but to be honest that just looks like part of the gun to me. I guess it might be a little bit clearer when we actually have a full rotational view of the model. As well as the gun changes, she's also had 1 drone change as well. Her command link drone apparently remains the same, but she's had her boosted shield drone swapped for an MV-37 Advanced Guardian drone. This one's an interesting one in that it confers a Feel No Pain type save, where you ignore wounds on the roll of a 6+ to all models within 3 inches. And that doesn't appear to be limited to Shadowsun either, so you could potentially park this thing near a Riptide, or even multiple Riptides, and give them all a 6+ Feel No Pain type save while the drone is still in effect. It could be a very nasty little buff that, particularly if Shadowsun is repeatedly calling Cayune down, as she likes to at the moment. I sort of wonder on the new datasheet whether or not she'll have to stay next to the drone, or whether she can just abandon it next to some really heavy Tau firepower and go off and go hunting things with her fusion blasters. Finally, they've shown off a new rule called Supreme Commander, which will basically allow Shadowsun to be a bit more universal in taking in multiple Tau armies, rather than just in armies that are specifically Tau Sept. The Supreme Commander rule basically allows her to appear in another Sept without preventing them from taking their Sept tenet. Although she does not gain that Sept tenet herself, she still only ever gains the 5+ Overwatch for being in Tau Sept if she is in a Tau Sept detachment. Either way, I can see why they did this, as she is the leader of all the Tau armed forces at the moment, so I could see her leading any Sept into battle pretty happily. And of course, it'll let Games Workshop sell more models to people who aren't just playing Tau Sept. Very crafty there. One thing that's interesting is that she can even be included in an army containing Farsight as well now, and it's well known that the two don't get on. Still, I guess you can have great rivals working together. We certainly can in tournaments from the amount of Magnus Mortarion combos that we've seen in tournaments over the last year or so, so at least there's nothing stopping Tau from pulling the same shenanigans now. Either way, I think that this looks like a reasonable boost to the Tau firepower and army at the moment. I'd really like to see it where Tau can become a bit more of a codex that can stand on its own 2 feet without just relying on something like 40 shield drones to make enemy firepower completely irrelevant, which is certainly powerful, but a little one-dimensional. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Is this shaping up to be a good update from your point of view? I guess we won't know 100% until the book comes out, but it's certainly very interesting. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more in-depth 40k tactics videos like this. We have new content coming out every day. The channel also has a Patreon page if you'd like to drop any support there, the link's in the description. It also allows some bonus content such as my own tournament attendances and reports, voting on what videos come next for the channel, and occasional prize giveaways. Though of course its main purpose is to try and allow me to do these 40k videos as more of a full-time thing. And of course a big thank you to all of you who are already supporting. Thanks very much for listening, hoping to see some love for the Imperial Guard and Genestealer cults in the next few days, and I'll hope to see you guys in the next episode.